heroes.
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर होने को है आगाज, सफर पर चलने का बढ़ने का। इतना है हासिला जितना भी फासला, मंजिल दे मिल ही जाना है, हम में है हीरा।
हौसले पे सवार आगे बढ़ रहा है इंडिया और इसे रफ्तार दे रहे हैं 10 करोड़ हीरोज।
दिल धीरे धीरे धड़के आज फिर हो
Hi, Veer.
Hi Sanjay, how are you?
We seem to be the only two guys on this at the moment.
Yeah. You're in, where are you logging in from? From Pune?
Pune.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Haven't been traveling much.
No. You're going to start soon or not?
Well, I haven't been traveling much. I'm moving around, but not as much as it was
Not as much.
the year before.
I can imagine.
To Bombay a few times,
Okay.
but and Delhi and Hyderabad.
Okay.
Hyderabad is collecting old money.
Hyderabad is what? Sorry?
Collecting old money from old projects. We got up top in 2008. They're still not closed.
Oh boy.
Maybe we're on public. See you
Hi,
later.
good morning. Good morning, Sam. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. And you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. Where are you logging in from? Which
I am logging in from South London.
From South London. Okay.
And where are you seated?
In Mumbai. In Mumbai. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it over in person. Maybe next year we'll do that.
Yeah, well, I actually would have loved to have made it over there, to be honest. But you know, again,
Of course. Do
fingers crossed.
have you visit India often or not so much?
No, but various different contacts. So actually, last weekend I had a little podcast on. There's a Mumbai-based circular economy sort of Instagram and podcaster. So I had a very good chat with her and did a podcast with her.
Oh.
So yeah, lots of interaction both on the project I'll talk about during this event, but also in various other guises. So I'm very keen to get there and participate in person.
Okay, that's amazing. Super. How's the weather in London?
Definitely autumnal. So we're hitting autumn. You know, temperatures come off a bit. We've actually seen some sun for 2 days, which is exciting.
There you go.
Nobody knows what to do with it. It's oh my goodness. What?
Yeah, we have our monsoon going on here, so it's been dreary for the last at least the last month or so. Hopefully we'll get.
And what about any reflections on sort of changes in weather patterns, particularly in Mumbai?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had crazy weather. We've had cyclones come through, which have not been normal. Of course, the winters have gotten slightly cooler. Of course, it's all relative, but yeah, definitely significant change in weather and unpredictability. I think much more unpredictable. I think that's what's happening all over the world, I think.
And I agree. And I think that so often when we talk about sort of average global temperatures, it's that volatility that is difficult to understand and indeed to predict and forecast, obviously. So
yeah, we had 2 bad cyclones, one this year and the one before, the year before. So both in the middle of COVID, which made things even more complicated. But I think they're becoming more normal now. Let's see. Hi, Mukundan, how are you? I think you're on mute.
Great to meet again.
Yeah.
Virtually moving from one Zoom room to another.
Yeah, Mukundan's just been moving from one Zoom room to the other, talking his way through. So you've had a busy morning.
Yeah.
I think we're still waiting for some more members. Rahul, hi, how are you? Good, I'm seeing some people now. Rahul, I think you're muted. If you can unmute.
Morning, Mr. Advani.
Hi, Lakshmi. How are you?
Hi, very
Hi,
well.
Rahul, how
We're
are
just
you?
waiting for Tanya, but if you'd
Okay.
like, we can begin and she can join in if
No,
that's
we'll
okay for you.
we'll give her a minute or two. Hi, Fergus.
All right.
How are you? Fergus is just.
Hi there.
Hi.
I feel like I should have put a suit on. I'm sorry. Gone for the Friday look.
In fact, all of us should be wearing t-shirts, so that would be more appropriate.
It made me feel much more comfortable.
Fergus, you didn't get the memo.
No one mentioned that.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, CII is very particular about dress code. We got very strict instructions in the morning. So,
So Tanya's here. I think we're a full house now, Mr. Advani.
Great. Hi, good morning, Tanya. How are you?
Good morning. Apologies, just some Zoom issues there. Lovely to be with you.
Great, good. I think we're full house.
Yeah.
So we'll get going. I think we've got a number of people logged in online, and I think we're live. So with that, I'll get started. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to my colleagues in India, and welcome to the sectoral session on sustainability and the circular economy, the India experience. It gives me great pleasure to chair this important session that has an exemplary set of speakers from both the UK and India. The last 18 months has seen vulnerabilities of all kinds, from health crises to rapid responses, and from livelihood challenges to supply chain disruptions, just to name a few. What has become apparent is how fragile global supply chains are and the interdependencies that characterize the global economy. The need to secure resources and the supply of essential commodities are the focus of all governments. In parallel, all countries are looking to revive economic growth. It is opportune to examine the potential for new business models, alternate materials, reduced raw material consumption, possibilities of redesigning processes and products, and a supporting policy framework for these via a transition to a circular economy. Many of you will know a circular economy is an industrial system that is restorative or regenerative by intention and design. It replaces the end-of-life concept with restoration. It encourages the use of resources in an efficient manner and aims for the elimination of waste through the superior design of materials, products, systems, and within this, radically different business models. Today, unfortunately, according to Circularity Gap Report 2020, the global economy is only 8.6% circular. Scarcity of conventional raw materials of required quality is adding to the cost of doing business. In addition, externalities like climate change, mounting geopolitical tensions around the globe, tariff wars, etc., are disrupting perfectly functioning markets and material supply routes. Adopting circular economy principles can cushion enterprises from such shocks. Of course, in addition to it being a defensive strategy, front-running companies can proactively pursue circular strategies and successfully develop new circular markets. Whatever the motivation, it is more and more apparent that in order to remain competitive in this global market and create a future-proof business, circular economy business strategies must be adopted. This calls for a reassessment of traditional business models, and of course, it calls for deep and widespread collaboration amongst all stakeholders, such as industry, government, and consumers. Coming to India, a transition to a circular economy is probably a prerequisite to fulfilling India's economic growth ambitions and competitiveness of Indian business. We are all aware of the new programs the government has launched aimed at increasing self-reliance and economic and employment generation while restoring much needed economic growth. These growth ambitions will not be fulfilled in this resource-stressed world without a complete rethink on a number of fronts. While the more visible ones include renewable energy, in which India is making great strides, adoption of a circular economy seems imperative. So with this context, the session aims to deliberate on how different stakeholders can work together to co-create a new paradigm of growth that is based on a circular economy. We have both CEOs and policy advocates who will share their own experiences in the field, and I'm sure we will all gain from their collective wisdom. So with that opening, I'd like to now invite Mr. Sam Baker, lead Goal 13 Impact Platform COP26, and also a partner at Deloitte, to share his thoughts. Sam, over to you. If you could unmute yourself, please, Sam.
I was hoping that wasn't going to be me, but anyway. So good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Yeah, delighted to be here with you. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. So just a little bit about Goal 13. So Goal 13, the Goal 13 Impact Platform, named after the 13th Sustainable Development Goal, climate action, has been put together as a non-commercial initiative together with the CBI, CII, and others, and Deloitte. And very simply, the focus is on climate change, but we'll come to the circular economy in a minute. But the focus is on climate change, and the intent is to create a free and open repository of climate action. So very simply, to capture information from companies, get it validated by those companies, put it up on a free and open access platform, and allow people to learn and then collaborate. And it might be, an Indian company collaborating with the US or a UK company, or within India, within the UK, whatever. But the whole intent is to try and foster that understanding of what different companies are doing. So we've currently interviewed about 420 companies. And it's very gratifying that actually we, reach out to probably 1 in 5 companies, get as far as actually having an interview and validating their information with us. And I think that's tremendous. That's a real positive sign that people want to share and they want to participate and they want to work together. We then communicate that via the platform itself, so people can get on the platform and see the responses, but we also do that via panels, by speaking, by reports, and we're building out a big report for COP26, which will profile and distill the learnings from those 450 companies. What we ask, so the information that we ask for is really sort of narrative around what they're doing around climate. And so we ask for the drivers, so what's stimulating change. We ask for the way that they're organized against change. That we ask for the targets and commitments, which can normally be seen online. Anyway, we then go to initiatives. So what are the most important initiatives? We ask about barriers, and then we ask about lessons learned. And already though you mentioned, stakeholders and working together. So one of the sort of critical themes that comes out of this is that all the stakeholders of a company are changing in terms of their expectations of that company in order to respond to a more sustainable future, and particularly around climate change, but also more broadly. And those expectations have to be met for that company to be successful. And there is also a sense that very often the challenges are systemic. And so it isn't something that the company can do on its own, either in the amount of time it's got, or because it doesn't have the capability, or it doesn't have the operational reach, for instance, up and down its supply chain or across its sector or into policy. And so collaboration is emphasized as well. So all stakeholders are putting on pressure. It's critical to engage with the pressure and what that means for the business. But it's also important to recognize that this is not a single player sport. This is actually a team sport, and it's got to be done together. The overarching lesson as well, I would say, is that there is good intent, there's good understanding, there's building, best practice building, but we're still not really off the mark in terms of impactful initiatives. A lot of the initiatives being put forward as impactful are actually capability building. They're not actually delivering the answer, they're preparing to deliver the answer. And the key message really, I think, that comes through out of all of this is that we have to bring things like sustainability and climate change into the heart of the business model, the formula for success, drive it into strategy, drive it into operations, drive it into culture and communications. And if we don't do that, then these issues stay on the side. They stay as an overlay. They stay as something which is, it could be important. It could be an important part of where you think you are as a business, but there will always be a conflict with the core business machine, the business model, the formula for success. So that to me is the key thing that comes out. And you can see very advanced companies putting out big targets, having really significant plans, but the key issue that they find is they can't get the prioritization of the initiatives and the resources because they're struggling with their climate initiatives vis-a-vis business as usual. So just to finish here, and I hope later as we get into the conversation we can sort of touch on these different bits and pieces. But what I wanted to finish on was just sort of bringing this round to the circular economy, because very often we have different, if you like, tents of sustainability. So you've got the climate change tent, you've got nature-based solutions, you've got the circular economy, and we all recognise there's sort of there's overlaps, but we're not exactly sure where those are all overlap, and it can become quite confusing for companies. It becomes quite confusing for policymakers, anybody else involved, not least because the advocates within those different tents are very vocal. And for me, thinking about the circular economy, the circular economy, the way of reflecting on how we constrain our impact on the planet is at the heart. I mean, you paraphrase it very nicely in your definition of a circular economy, but ultimately that's what it's about. That's where we have to move to. So that is a sort of medium and long-term solution. The question is, how does climate, you can imagine some circular economy type approaches at a system level to actually increase emissions. It might be harder to, I don't know, get, base metals out of an iPhone or whatever else it might be and then reconstitute it. But I think that the way to think about how these two things interact is that climate change is the ultimate challenge to be addressed by a circular economy approach. It is the ultimate, example of effluent, of waste being released, which is then damaging us, i.e. CO2 or CO2 equivalents. And it's our failure to create a sort of, a circular approach to effectively the things that we use for oil and gas, be that, power, mobility, the production of steel, the way we manage our land and dairy. These are the things which aren't circular. They are releasing waste into the atmosphere. That atmosphere is causing climate warming, causing a huge issue. So I think there is a matter of huge urgency to bring that sophisticated system thinking into the climate tent in a much more coherent fashion than is currently done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks very much. I think more than once you've talked about, you close with system thinking, you've talked about an integrated approach. I think you're also trying to highlight that unless climate change or circular economy thinking is integrated fully into the organization, into the system, it's not going to be successful or effective. So we'll come back to that, because I'd like to see some examples if you have any to share, especially given that you have 426 interviews that you've integrated into your platform. So I think you have a lot of knowledge there I'm sure we'll be able to learn from, because one of the things I'm hoping to do today, if it's possible, is to get real live examples from each of you in your own organizations of what you've heard, through interviews or interactions, because I think our listeners will benefit from that, because they'll be able to take away some of those ideas and implement them in their organizations. So thank you. We'll come back to that. I would now like to invite Mr. R. Mukundan, Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemicals Limited. Mukundan, if you can give us your comments, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Veer. And I can not but agree with Sam vigorously. I think I fully agree with everything you said. But I want to say that for us as a company, we think of this as part of circular economy, as part of three broad pillars in sustainability. The first pillar for us is carbon and climate change. That's one pillar. Circular economy is the second pillar. And the third one is biodiversity. We look at them as three key drivers, and there's a lot of interplay between them. What I want to endorse it, I think that what's been said already is that circular economy cannot be an afterthought. It must be a design thinking right at the beginning, and it must be part of your strategy. I think we got many things wrong in the last, our company has been running for 85 years. We had many things wrong in the past, but that's because at that time, this was not the thinking in the mind. But right now, the way we are looking at it is to, right at the design stage, target zero. Look at resource intensity reduction at every stage, because I think at the end of the day, it's all about resource intensity reduction. And bring in green chemistry, something which has gained a momentum now, and people are looking at it. Now, in terms of broad specifics, let me get down to specifics. We had set up the chemical plant with a huge amount of effluent stream. And of course, we were filtering the effluent, converting that into solid, and in some cases diluting it, meeting the standards, and then pushing it out into the sea post all the corrections. But I think about 15 years ago, we decided we don't want to do it. We actually then built a cement plant. It was the first cement plant in India, 500,000 ton, to convert all the waste into useful product cement. The first hurdle we hit was standards. Meeting the standards was a big issue, because you're bringing disparate elements to, chemistry works, but chemistry in real life is a very different thing. After we hit the standards, we got all the ISO certification. The next thing was to convince customers. Customers were not convinced. People are scared when they want. So converting them was a big issue. Today, of course, we sell all the product and people are very happy. Clearly, I think at that point, we were not able to actually communicate to our employees why we were doing what we were doing. It was adding to cost in the company. But over a period of time, we've decided to sort of give it an excellent brand name. The branding we've given, not many people understand circular economy, but we call it urban mining. You don't mine for limestone. You actually produce the same product by using urban mining. And that's why there are many examples. Our own user industry, we supply chemicals to glass industry. Glass industry, for example, I think uses cullets, which is used glasses, and they're able to recycle almost 60% to reproduce the same product. And when we were building our next set of businesses, and when we were making a foray into teams to look at battery as a business, actually the first business which commercially took off for us was not really the finished product battery, but to get the used batteries to convert them into base materials. So we are actually today recycling batteries to extract lithium, extract nickel, extract cobalt out of that, and resell back to the users. And most of it is bought out by the Atomic Energy Commission here. They buy all the cobalt and nickel for whatever purpose they need to, but I think we sell it to them. But that's been a useful learning for us, that in every business, deconstructing it to base materials and extracting it at a very cost-effective way and putting it back to use is a useful way to think about it. So as and when the entire lithium battery business becomes big in India, we would be ready to sort of support the industry through recycling process, which is one of the things we started out as the first element or the first pillar of the business. So if it is part of the strategy and design, I think then you will start thinking about it even as you build a business. And I think that goes to the heart of the way we have to think about future. This cannot be an afterthought. It must be a design, at a part of a strategy, a part of an effort to say we will reduce the resource intensity. And effectively, I think we need to make sure that we, even as we build these solutions, we are able to meet the standards, we are able to take the customers along, and broadly, effectively communicate that to customers through branding and effective communication.
Great. Thank you, Mukundan. So this is a new dimension. I had not thought about the whole challenge of branding and convincing the customer. I think that's a new dimension that you brought into this discussion. And of course, challenges in meeting standards. I think that's come out. I'll come back to you on this new business. I think your company is approaching this whole subject as a proactive or an aggressive move of trying to identify new businesses, which is quite an interesting model. I don't see too many Indian companies at least trying to take that approach. Many of us tend to have a more defensive approach to circular economy. So I'll come back to you on that when we get a chance. Thanks so much. With that, I'd like to move on to Mr. Rahul Munjal, Chairman and Managing Director of Hero Future Energies Private Limited. Rahul, if you can give us your remarks, please.
Thanks, Veer, for that. It's at the offset, I think it's great that sustainability is a key pillar of the India-UK partnership, and just goes to show what's on everybody's mind today. And I love the fact that everywhere we read, post the pandemic, everybody wants to rebuild sustainably. So that's always good to see. And obviously, we've all heard Bill Gates say that taking care of the pandemic was much easier than what it's going to be like to take care of the climate change. And Sam, I agree with you. Manufacturing, telecom, all the industries need to reinvent themselves sustainably. It needs to be a part of the DNA. And some of my thoughts around that part, just this part was today, and you can call it ESG, or you can call it sustainability or greening. It's a little bit like risk was about 2 decades back. We didn't know, companies were not reporting risk, they were not measuring risk, nobody was responsible. So it's a little bit like what, and today if you see almost everybody discloses their risk, and especially listed companies, they even disclose it on the internet or on their balance sheets. So I think we should go down this path, especially with maybe on the ESG front, we can do it all only for sustainability, but it should become a DNA. It should be boards should be held liable, investors should be held liable, management should be held liable. And I feel the way risk became an important part of all our businesses, so will this, and mainly on ESG. And moving on to circular economy, I'm seeing 2 or 3 big things happening. I'll talk about one on a micro level, and then I'll come into what is happening in renewables. On a micro level, we've seen, and I'll talk about 3 innovations here. Tiles are being made from soot in the air, leather being made from coconut water, or bricks being made from face masks and other PE kits. So on a micro level, India is super innovative, and people are, if you want to call it circular, you want to call this recycling, I'm not sure where this will fall between circular or recycling, but it does fall somewhere in the middle. And we see lots of this level of innovation happening, but sadly, it doesn't happen to scale, and sadly, we're not able to export this and fulfill, to find its proper place in the world. So we need to figure out how we can take these MSMEs in India, take these innovators and expose them to their markets globally, because there are some fantastic things happening. Now move on to a bigger problem which we are creating for ourselves, but we don't have a choice. India plans to deploy 450 gigawatts of wind, solar, and battery storage projects. And of course, my company will play a small part in that as well. The inventory of these solar panels, steel towers, resin blades, lithium-ion batteries will eventually reach their end of life. What happens then? First and foremost, engineers, scientists all over the world are working tirelessly to ensure that 25 years is not the end of life for a solar module, but it's pushed to at least 30, if not beyond that. So the first is we need to extend the lifespan of most of these products, I think, which the world is moving towards. We need to find economically viable solutions. So to extract the solar panels or to unbundle a solar panel, because to undo a solar panel today in today's technology is still very expensive. I know as far as EVs go, the end of life doesn't mean the end of life for the battery. Battery has a second life, and now there's talks to have a third life as well. So there is some real discussions happening. When you take out a battery from a car, can you use it in a house? And you probably can today, because it still has enough in it. So there is a lot of discussions. There's a lot of discussions around both circular as well as recycling. And since UK is extremely, is playing a pivotal role in innovation and clean tech, and I want to, and I think others have also over the last couple of days spoken about the AstraZeneca example, and I really like it. It is very true to what the power of India and UK partnership can be. If something was developed at Oxford in the UK, but was manufactured at scale in India, that's the power of our relationship between the two countries. And I hope for sustainable products, we can do and see the same. And with that, I'd like to end for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rahul. So something interesting. Yeah, I think you're trying to highlight that renewable energy and our big plans that we have may not be enough, because there's an end of life to that as well, to that entire investment in infrastructure. So before we get complacent and we just get satisfied that we're meeting the renewable goal, I think we should be already starting to work on extending the life of those renewable assets, so that they can be renewable on a end-to-end life cycle basis. So I take that point, and we'll try and maybe when we come back to the Q&A, you can give us some examples of what your organization is doing on that front of extending. I know you're a big player in that field. Thank you. If I can now move on to Ms. Tanya Kumar. She's the head of sustainability at the Confederation of British Industry. Tanya, if you can share your thoughts and maybe some feedback from your member companies and what they're doing in the circular economy. Thank you.
Many thanks, and then thank you to all of the opening remarks. Particularly insightful, and I think a lot that we would agree on here at the Confederation of British Industry. And I think one of the key points there is bringing together actually sustainability with achieving net zero, because it's not only just about climate mitigation, it's also about adaptation and resilience. That's really important, that last word on resilience. And we've seen that throughout the last 18 months, that we don't have that resilience in our supply chains. And if we're talking about resilience when it comes to sustainability, we have limited resources. So we need to understand how to use the resources that we have better in all of our processes and the products that we are creating, looking at that life cycle analysis, which many have spoken about just now, but also managing the waste from our products and processes better. Now, that has been heightened and really understood increasingly throughout our work with Sam Baker's team at Deloitte, in terms of businesses now understanding better what is going into their products. I think it's that importance of bringing sustainability as part of setting net zero targets as well. So when we're looking at businesses, looking at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, the most difficult part is remaining to be around scope 3. And having that understanding now in terms of our supply chains during the pandemic, what is going into every stage of our products and processes. I think, Mukundan, I completely agree with you on that point, the importance there of standards as well. And it hasn't, in the area of sustainability, we haven't developed a lot of those standards at the same pace as we are seeing those developments on decarbonisation. And that's not to say that we've got all the way on decarbonisation either. There is still some way to go. So we have this opportunity to make sure that these are being seen in a holistic way, that actually to make your processes sustainable will actually lead to reduced emissions. So that's a huge learning curve to go through currently. And as part of that, it's not only the standards point, it's also about that data and transparency aspect, that now that sharing of best practice, but also sharing between the private sector, that point just now that we heard from Rahul on collaboration between UK and India. This is what is needed now in terms of how can we share a lot more understanding about what is going into production processes. And business community can be a great enabler of change in this respect, like what we've seen in decarbonisation. And on that systems integrated thinking, all of us that run businesses, when you're looking at your balance sheets as well, sort of understanding, the cost of materials, that is a very live issue now globally. And as we're looking to develop more innovations as well, building that into what we are creating, but also that collaborative piece with our universities as well, setting those challenges of how can we create products that actually stand the test of time, but can also adapt to the changing pressures that we will have as a society. So that is an extremely important point. The other aspect that we haven't touched on is also finance as an enabler for change as well. I know that has also been a big focus of discussion, but as you've mentioned, I think that can be one powerful tool going forwards, looking at the longevity of products, but also capital markets looking to invest in a lot of these ideas. But finally, that point on consumers, absolutely, they need to be empowered. And when we think about consumers, it's not just those that are buying products, it's also about the staff, the employees, B2B, understanding why you are creating those new products, but also creating that visible market for secondhand materials. So making sure that consumers are actually understanding that when you do drink your can of beverage, etc., having that accessibility that something can be recycled, being brought into that process as well, that is hugely important. And here in the UK, we are also trying to improve that. We spearheaded things like having a deposit return scheme for materials. So that's something that we can also share and learn and mobilize one another's communities. But I'll leave it at that for now and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Tanya. I think you brought in a couple of important points. One is, of course, the entire subject of data availability, transparency, and how that information can be leveraged, globally. It doesn't need to be in a particular country. And along with that, the involvement of academia and how we can integrate them or involve them in this whole mission. Of course, finance is always important, and you brought that in. I was going to ask that later about how everyone thinks how important that is in making this happen. I know that's a big part of it, so we'll come back and talk about that. And I think, like Mukundan mentioned, I think getting the consumer involved is extremely important, either to get their buy-in or to get them actually involved in the movement. So thank you so much. We'll try and cover a couple of these points when we're done with the last speaker. With that, I have our last speaker of the morning. I'd like to invite Mr. Fergus Bailey. He's a policy advisor at the Department for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy. Fergus, even though you're in a t-shirt, we'd still love to hear from you. So over to you.
I feel like I've now overdone it with slides. I feel like it's probably a bit too much, but I thought I've just come to explain Business Climate Leaders Campaign. My name's Fergus Bailey. I'm part of the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. We are going to explain to you today the Race to Zero campaign. So that's the UN campaign. And then below it, we have the UK campaign, which is Together for Our Planet. And the Net Zero Business Engagement Leader is Andrew Griffiths, and that's who I'm working with at the moment. As you've all spoken about today, SMEs are key, and we want to try and mobilize as many as possible around the UK and also the world. As you can see, the UK's doing well, and we'd really like to see more businesses around the world sign up to Race to Zero. They're the most agile SMEs and are most able to adapt to changes. So we really want to encourage as many of them to get involved as possible. We've also found that representing regions and encouraging a bit of healthy competition around the UK has really helped boost signups. We've been doing Growth Hub speeches and speaking to local businesses, and a bit of sort of healthy competitiveness has really increased interaction and has been really, really positive for the campaign so far. We're also highlighting the top reasons to join the UN's Race to Zero, looking at growing your business with customers who find sustainability is really important to them, so they will go to them. Also future-proofing your business. Regulations are inevitably going to come along, and I think they will be key to ensuring that everybody gets on board. And at the moment, I know in my department, there's a lot of talk about what regulations can be put in place to encourage more net zero sign up and participation. And then, of course, also being part of the solution. So everything can be found on the SME Climate Hub, and you can go there and sign up and commit to the UN's Race to Zero. It looks like this, and the aim is for businesses to halve their greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and then disclose a progress report on a yearly basis. And on the right there is the registration form. It's very, very simple. So we encourage businesses from all over the world to register and then hopefully get involved and use all the resources which are here. So I'm just going to go through a little bit about what's on there. So there are steps to cut emissions. These are just general cross-cutting ones. Some of them are quite low capital, some of them are a bit more expensive, like putting in EV charging points. But something as simple as switching to LED lights is really, really useful. It's a great way to start your journey. And so we encourage small things. We've then also got sector-specific guidance. This has been continuously updated, and we encourage everybody to have a look and see if there's anything that could be related to their sector and which could help them reduce their emissions. We've then also got quite a wide case study portfolio. We believe that businesses are most interested when you share some stories and have some sort of like-minded businesses that are going on the same journey as them. And we know that it's quite daunting for a small business to look at net zero, especially after the pandemic. We know that a lot of them are in quite dire straits. So we're trying to show other businesses doing great work and just small or low, low cost initiatives, turning off the lights when you leave the office, turning off printers, things like that. It's small, but it's still a great start. So we've got a huge portfolio of case studies, which are happy to share as well, any initiatives. And then on the hub, there are lots of tools and resources, and the aim is to start with a business strategy, and then the business strategy will then highlight the areas that you can reduce your emissions. And then as long as you continue to measure, These tools will help you measure those your reductions all the way up to hopefully being net zero by before 2030 or 2050. And that's everything from me.
Great, thank you, Fergus. I think a couple of us have talked about it. It's about an integrated approach and having the government involved, and in this case, leading at least a part of that industry, the SMEs. I think that is that you're hand-holding them through this process, and that's extremely essential. I think what we will do is we may reach out to you as CII, because we have a very large SME base in India, many of whom would probably benefit from some of these case studies that you've captured. Many of them will be reusable and leverageable. So I'll ask my colleagues at CII to maybe reach out to you and get that connect. So thank you.
Sounds perfect.
That before I come to questions, there's Sunil Kant Munjal. He's one of my colleagues who's on the mission from India today. He'd like to come in and say a few words on the subject. So Sunil, over to you, please.
Thank you, Veer. So I've enjoyed the conversation so far. It's interesting to see how the very definition of sustainability, circular economy, etc., is actually transforming itself continuously. I want to add a completely new perspective from the one that's been discussed so far. And I will talk about a specific project that our foundation has currently undertaken. This is a fairly unique arts and culture center being set up in Delhi at probably amongst the largest scales that has been, these kind of things have been done in the world. But what we did do, we said this should be a conscious, comprehensive, and one which has treads lightly on the planet in every aspect of the world. So we started first looking at ancient Indian practices, architectural practices, of passive techniques that were available. And by the way, they were being used 500 or 700 years ago, of passive cooling, passive heating, lighting, ventilation, etc. And it's absolutely amazing how many there are and how efficient there are, and how we have completely forgotten to use all those old techniques as we switch to copying every building, becoming a robotic copy of the previous one with glass facades, etc., etc. While we are looking at ancient techniques, at the same time, we also have Intel, Google, Microsoft, Siemens, Schneider and Schneider working with us on the modern techniques and technologies that are available in what they call smart cities. We're trying to squeeze that down into one complex, because the complex has about 9 different buildings coming up inside. So we're using all the smart city techniques within this area itself. We're also using things like generating water from the atmosphere, using geothermal cooling, using micro wind generators. So a whole host of techniques are being used and practically deployed, so that it also becomes a demonstration center. We are proposing that this will be available for anyone to come and learn and anyone to come and see. So if any of you have any ideas of techniques and technologies, please feel free to send them to us. We are very happy to look at anything that can go in at this stage. We are also doing a full carbon journey of everything that is going in, not just where at the manufacturing stage of that product, but also how it gets into the complex at what we are calling the Serendipity Arts Live Museum right now. How does it get from the point of view of generation to point of view of actual use? We are also at the same time attempting to turn this into a carbon neutral, a water positive, and potentially the most energy efficient and eco-friendly building built in that region in some time. But we're not stopping there. We are actually going a little bit beyond this. We are also turning this into an inclusive center. And by inclusive, I mean inclusion of all kinds. So full wheelchair access to every part of the facility, the ability of a blind person to be able to walk through the entire complex without asking for help, the facility for those with hearing impairments, visual impairments, those with learning disabilities. So there are special tools, techniques, and programs being designed for them. So I'm actually pushing the boundary of what you folks are calling the circular economy a little bit more, because at the end of the day, it has to be for human beings, for people. At this moment, and I'm going to talk about one more inclusion that we are doing of what are normally invisible people in our lives. So we've actually already started running. Our foundation is already running. This center is a new one we are setting up, but we've been doing these programs now for about 7 or 8 years. So we are running programs for street children, programs for the girl child, programs for orphanages, projects for the elderly for the care homes. And if you think about it, these are people who are normally not part of our normal everyday lives. They're excluded. Even the access to the facilities, and these will be, by the way, best-in-class global facilities for all art forms. This is a facility being made for visual arts, culinary arts, performing arts, and performance arts all together, including interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary arts projects within this facility. So there will not just be a museum and theaters and amphitheaters, but also galleries and art, an artisanal village and artist studios and residencies and a research center and a full education center inside. The idea is to actually make it both comprehensive and all encompassing so that it actually is able to meet needs of society. It is able to focus not just on education, but also on entertainment, including things like conferences, conclaves, conversations. We triggered a conversation about 6 or 8 years ago, and please note, I'm saying this is a different aspect of the circular economy. We triggered a conversation 6 or 7 years ago, actually maybe 8 years ago, to talk about the very relevance of museum in today's life. It's often been seen that those who go to museums, and I'm not saying all, but majority, many, are either sent by their schools, especially young people, or as a punishment, because they have become static, and our life today is moving ahead so rapidly. So we are trying to turn all of this into an experiential place. So experience is part of inclusion, part of the circular economy. So in most museums in the world, or most galleries in the world, they tell you don't touch the exhibit. We are creating at least 2 galleries where it will say, please touch everything. So there is also focus on the olfactory. So on all senses, as you may be aware, olfactory senses have the highest recall in the brain. The touch comes actually third. It's not even the first one. The visual comes, which is the one we normally cater to, actually comes third or fourth. So we are focusing on a complete experience, and all this information and data will be displayed on screens in multiple places. So anybody who walks in will know what impact they have on the ecosystem when they are inside the place. Including on the food that is being cooked, there will be a program to demonstrate whether what part of this food is eco-friendly and what is not, and how much is recycled and how much is not. So it's a fairly extensive program attempting to try and do all things for everyone. And that's a very scary statement to make. But that is an attempt we are making right now. It's a project which is currently under design. We'll start construction in about 3 months from now. And we have experts literally from around the globe working on this, including Crab Studio here. UCL is doing some work with us. Bartlett is doing some work. Bill McDonough from the US is working on this. Ramball, CP Kukreja from Delhi, as also the Arab from the UK. So we've gathered experts, minds, and folks from around the globe to create a best-in-class in all aspects. We don't know how it will turn out, but that's the attempt that we have at this moment to truly demonstrate what a circular economy actually means.
It's amazing, Sunil. I think,
and of course, it will have all the stuff for artists and artisans and curators and academics in there.
That's by the way.
Yep.
No, that's amazing, because I think you've covered one very important part, which is the whole subject of construction and green construction, and the circular economy in that context is very, very important. And then you've taken a step further, and you're saying I'm not going to stop at building the building and maintaining the building, but I'm actually going to try and I'm going to track how people come in and what resources they consume and show it to them. So I think it goes back to one of the speakers who said that at the heart of all of this is about resource utilization, about optimizing resource utilization. So if you look at circular economy from that point of view, which is what I think you are trying to help our audience understand, I fully agree with you. It's not just about a product or a process, but it's about the entire life cycle. So
because normally we look at a very narrow slice of the life.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for that intervention. We have about 10 minutes. So I had a couple of questions that I'll try and bounce around. We'll see if we can get through a few of them. Sam, if I can just take it back, you had 426 interviews that I think you've been through. Any of them, any one of them or two of them really stand out in your memory or that you're aware of that, the audience can learn from the perspective of innovation? Has anyone done something remarkably either on product or process innovation in this context?
Yes. So the one I sort of jotted down was neither Indian nor UK based. So this is Atir, which is an ICT company out of Scandinavia. Interesting to reflect, I guess, on the context there with, probably very, strict environmental laws, etc. So they started out as a reseller. They began to get, some years ago, they began to get into repair. And obviously, customers are just coming in saying this is broken. So they needed to include that as a customer need, to meet a customer need. The repair moved then to refurbishment, and refurbishment has moved to recycling. And the refurbishment, they've built a big business now to refurbish the equipment that comes back in. The recycling goes back into the supply chain to the likes of Dell or whatever the big technology providers. And initially, that started off to meet a customer need. Then it became something which began to drive efficiency, and they could make a market out of. And then, of course, they've begun to overlay this as part of their positioning in the marketplace. And they're tracking the carbon reduction, for instance, which was never really part of the initial scheme. They're now tracking the carbon reduced as a result of refurbishment, recycling, extending lifetime, etc. So for me, it's just a, of course, there are many examples of people refurbishing and repairing, so it's not perhaps the most innovative, but I think that journey that they've been on, the journey of bringing it from outside of the business model into the center of it, to the way they change the positioning in the marketplace, the cementing of relationships up and down the supply chain on this different dimension, and then the tracking and reporting on the emissions saved, I think all come together into a really nice package, which exemplifies, quite a few of the different things I think which need to be in place for this to really take hold in a business.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. Mukundan, if I can come over to you, you talked about the customer. So I think my question is around affordability, or the customer wanting or being able to pay. I understand that circular economy strategies may come out with a higher cost structure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Are customers willing to pay a premium for such products or solutions? What is your experience on that? Is it about branding, as you said? Is it about more than that? And how does one think through that? How do companies on this call think through, higher pricing or cost impact of this whole initiative?
So, Veer, I think you raise a very important point, and I think I would also go back to what Tanya said. I think the two key people we can't forget in the room is the employees, the people, and the consumers. And I think that goes back to what Sunil also mentioned. Whatever we do must be human-centered, otherwise it doesn't work. But really, I would go to your own industry. I think I know the star rating was a very, it doesn't amount to much, but it starts with what your industry has done so well. If you go and today consumers come and ask about, is it 4 or 5 star? I've seen that in refrigeration industry, in air conditioning industry, and I know it is a fact because when I go to retail store, which we run, Chroma, I've actually seen consumers do it right at the storefront. It's a personal experience. So if you can brand it, if you can communicate well, And they understand not at the, let's say, initial cost of ownership, but if you come out with a total life cycle cost, I think people do get the game. The second one is where this is where I think it cannot be what I think Sam said is very important. It cannot be one company doing it. It must be the entire ecosystem of coalition of companies doing it together, because then they can raise the standard together, and I think that then creates an ability to sort of absorb the cost, creates an ability to be more competitive. I think that's a second line. Third is about where companies have no choice. We had no choice because we just said that, listen, we don't want any effluent. We need to convert that to a product. So we had to create the product. So initially we had to actually sell it as a cement for finishing, not even cement for structures. So we're selling it at discount. But then what we started to do was we started to use that cement in our own township, in our own structures. And we could demonstrate to the masons that, listen, it works, come and see it, it works. And then they started to pay. Then there was some, as we started to brand it as a green product, I think we found the younger consumers, even in semi-urban areas, were willing to actually pick that product ahead of a well-known, very well-established brand. We are very small in cement. We only sell in Saurashtra, and there are big brands, all the big names there. But I think our product moves first because of that. So there is stickiness to product if communicated well. And I think it's something which we have to think deeply about. But across products, I think if we start at the design stage, I really think the cost angle which you bring in can be addressed much better than if it is an afterthought. This product which I spoke to you about was an afterthought. So obviously we had to go through the struggle. But if you look at now the battery business, our battery business has really not taken off, but our recycling business is the first one which has moved, which is already making money. So you start with the other end, and then you can move forward in different direction. But it's a complicated one. I don't want to say there's one answer to think. It's got to be product by product. It's got to be an experience by experience. We can't have one solution.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Rahul, I actually had two different questions for you. I'll go one by one so we can answer them also one by one. The first one, you talked about the MSME innovation. That was fascinating. I know because I often tell people that India, our entire culture and ethos is about reuse and extension of life, and I say that because I run an air conditioning company, and I'm amazed that our air conditioners run for 15 and 18 years, and in the West they get thrown out in 5 and 6 years. So, a question on that. You brought that out very well. My question is that, today we live in a different world. We live in a fast fashion, Zara type of world, Amazon same day delivery. We want, that 400 rupee thing delivered by 8 p.m. tonight, or else we get dissatisfied. This is all anti-circular economy thinking, right? And yet we know that we have MSMEs who are innovative. We have a culture that is reuse. So any thoughts on that and how India goes forward in the new world?
Absolutely. So let me just give you an example. And I met this 14-year-old girl in London, and she has stopped buying new clothes. So fast fashion is no more fast fashion. She's only, and she has, and I know her parents very well, and they have access to almost every shop there is in the world, but she refuses to buy new clothes because it's just not fashionable enough because of fast fashion, and she wants to be sustainable. So in millennials in the West, we see lots and lots of consciousness coming in. And I think you'll see that percolated to us, the older generation, sooner than later. And I won't be surprised if Glasgow Summit will play a very large part in that, will accelerate the adoption of it'll become cool to not be fast fashion, to be slow fashion. And Zara itself will take out, I don't know if it was a Levi's ad I was seeing, or there's one of the ads I was seeing, it said, wear the jeans for many, many years rather than a couple of washes. So it'll almost be fashionable for them to sell products which you wear for a much longer time. So it will come in sooner than we think. It is becoming more and more fashionable, thanks to internet, thanks to the millennials who are what they call woke, and they will make sure we, their parents, are also woke sooner than later. Yeah.
Thank you. And then coming back to your business, you made a good point that renewables is not renewables unless you can extend life. Do you have any examples of that, or are you working on any such solutions or technologies that you can tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just tell you about what all is out there. There is so Siemens actually announced as recently as last week that they've come out with completely recyclable blades, wind blades. So that was a very good news for the entire industry. And you know what it does is it forces all the other manufacturers to now come up with a completely recyclable blade. So so we've seen that happen. We've seen Indian government talk to the industry extremely strongly about what are we going to do with all the panels once the life is over. We've seen panels itself use materials now which are easily recyclable. So it's both from a government point of view, also from an industry point of view. Everybody is pushing for a circular economy, so to say. But just to touch upon another part, circular, just if you were to just go by the definition that I know of circular economy, it is when you use the same product over and over again for the same product. For example, aluminum in a Coke can, if you keep recycling it for a Coke can, the life is almost infinite because aluminum, nothing ever happens to it. And if you recycle it for the same product over and over again, you use the least amount of energy. So that's the most narrowest definition of a circular economy. But like Sunil Tata said, Sunil Uncle said, we need to expand the definition of circular, and we need to think beyond, where all can we use circular in our lives. So with that in mind, can we use blades over and over again as blades? Or of course, the steel structures of a wind turbine will be easily recyclable. So I don't see that as being a big problem. But steel in itself is an industry that needs to be sustainable, and we know the amount of steel that goes into renewables. And of course, cement itself is something that Mukund also spoke about. So the basic industries, when they become sustainable, I think we'll see a big move there in the entire ecosystem of the entire supply chain for renewables there.
So we are doing one interesting thing. We're on to the point Rahul is making in this, again, same project. Normal buildings are designed for 25 to 40 years. Even the piping that you put in the walls in India, at least, is designed only for 25 to 30 years. So we've asked the entire design team to design this building for use for 500 years. Everything should be functional. And because if you think back, there are buildings which were done 700 years ago, which are still around. It's only the newer ones that continue to collapse and just die.
Absolutely.
We are sitting on bedrock of quartzite. And the brief to the team is anything that comes out of this for excavation must get used within the building itself.
Excellent. Thank you.
If you permit me, I am reminded of what Mr. Munjal told me some days ago. I don't know whether you remember this. It comes from personal choice. This has to reflect in personal behavior. That's what he told me some years ago, including, whether you're going to buy a new shirt or new garment every day. And you said your discipline is, if you have to buy one, then you must get one out of the
Give one away. Yeah.
I still remember it. And I use that principle because it is such a wonderful principle that how do you extend life? How don't you, go into what you call too much consumption? I think that's a personal issue which you gave as an example.
Thank you. Tanya, we're short of time, but I do want to ask two more questions, one to Fergus, one to Tanya. Tanya, if you can come in first. You have a big set of companies under CBI. I wanted to ask, are you seeing startups coming up in circular economy, building new business models, not just being defensive, but actually creating new revenue streams in London and outside? And is that a trend in the UK that you see amongst your members?
Thank you very much. It's a great question, and just building on what Mukundan had said in terms of the opportunity is absolutely there, and that's where you get that collaboration between small businesses and big businesses who have that capacity to gather the data, etc., but don't know, because speaking to Sunil's point around you're still using the same practices. and you need someone to come and disrupt. So absolutely, we're seeing lots of small businesses come up in the sustainability space, and that's the beauty of the matchmaking, which I think that can be also extrapolated between the UK and India partnership as well. So also the business model where someone sees waste from one process and thinks about creating products from that, whether that be clothes from bricks, as we were talking about, or looking at reusing plastic bottles, looking at industrial processes as well. When we're looking even at the decarbonisation story, one heavy manufacturing process is giving off, affluent. How can that be used? And that's also about sustainability, right? In all of these industrial processes, how can one waste product at the end be utilized for someone else's product and processes? Same goes with heat and management systems. So yeah, it's a huge area of growth, and I look forward to continuing this discussion, because we're only just now scratching the surface. The more we have discussions like this, the more sharing that goes on in terms of best practice, and the more transparency in data will also push forward business models to come to the fore. And both governments have a big role in play in this, in terms of creating that framework for innovation as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Tanya. Last question, Fergus, and we'll wrap up. So we have to come back to money at the end of the day. And I wanted to ask you, we saw what great work the government is doing in handholding SMEs. Is there money as well that follows from the government in terms of finance to finance the SMEs to make these investments? Is there any learning we can take away for India on that count?
So currently we've only got, there's 3 grant schemes available for cycle to work schemes where you get bikes subsidized by the government, and then there's electric charging points and electrifying your vehicle fleet. Currently we're under a spending review, and it's definitely noted that we're going to need more funding to help businesses get to net zero. It's all sort of not, well, it hasn't been discussed quite yet, so I wouldn't be able to say exactly how much. But I know that things like local business growth hubs, there may be some funding for them to be able to reach businesses that we can't speak to on a daily basis. Sam and I have done 10 training sessions with local business growth hubs, and they're really key at speaking to local businesses in their area. They know more about them than we do. So I think there's probably going to be possibly funding for growth hubs, as they're the ones who can reach those audiences that we just as a government can't hit everybody. There's just not enough of us, sadly. But yes, hopefully funding will sort of pass COP. I think there'll be some more funding for this, definitely. We consider this bit the warm up, and then COP's the starter pistol. So we're really hoping that from COP that will be kicking on and be more funding and grants and subsidies for small businesses.
Thank you. Great. So thank you. I think we've run out of time. I've run a little over, so I'll wrap it up. I just want to thank each and every one of you. Sunil as well. He seems to have logged off, but he also contributed here. Really fantastic discussion. I'm sure the audience has really enjoyed it. I think transitioning to a circular economy is a strategic decision for every company. And I think they're going to be winners that will emerge as a consequence of this. I think we're all taking away some ideas today to try and go back to our own businesses and see how we can implement some new ideas. So with that, thank you very much, each of you. Really appreciate your time. And hopefully we get to see you in person in the near future. Take care and stay safe. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you.